my colleague, Jennifer Vasconcelos, via the Zoom chat, or you can email her, and she's put her email address in the chat box. And we'll talk about how to use chat in a moment too, if that's if you're unfamiliar with that. I still have a few folks joining us, so we're going to give one more minute and then we can get started. We have passed the 100 mark in terms of participants, and it's just a few minutes after 6 o'clock. I think we want to get ourselves ready here to initiate our meeting. Couple more people coming in. Okay, good. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our online community workshop. Before we even get started, we have some interpretation services available this evening, and I want to ask our interpreters to introduce themselves, Aldo and Van, and then I'll move to the next slide for the two of you to share instructions on how to join the interpretation channels, and then we will enable those channels after you speak. Aldo, do you want to go first? Oh, give us 1 second. One more logistical fix as we unmute you. Okay, Aldo, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. Bienvenidos al segundo taller virtual. Mi nombre es Aldo Ruiz Rivero. Voy a ser el intérprete al español el día de hoy para servirles a quienes deseen la interpretación en este idioma. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
And then?
Xin chào quý vị ạ. Tên tôi là Nguyễn Hồng Vân và tôi sẽ là phiên dịch tiếng Việt cho cuộc hội thảo ngày hôm nay.
Aldo, do you want to tell us how to use the interpretation tool? And then Van. Aldo, are you able to unmute? Ben, do you want to go ahead and tell us how to, oh, we got you, Aldo, go ahead.
Buenas tardes. Bueno, para recibir la interpretación al idioma español, les vamos a pedir que cuando vean el icono de un globo terráqueo en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla, presionen en ese icono y luego escojan el idioma de su preferencia. Si es lo que desean es español, escojan Spanish, hagan clic en español y estaremos en el canal de español brindándoles el servicio. Thank you very much.
Vâng, thưa quý vị, lát nữa khi mà cái chức năng nghe phiên dịch được bật lên thì quý vị sẽ nhìn thấy một hình quả cầu ở phía dưới cùng của thanh công cụ của màn hình Zoom. Thì khi ấn vào đó thì quý vị sẽ thấy tiếng Việt, Vietnamese. Ấn tiếng Việt thì quý vị sẽ nghe được phần phiên dịch song song. Và nếu muốn thì quý vị có thể tắt tiếng của người đang trình bày bằng tiếng Anh là ấn vào cái chỗ tên là Mute Original Audio. Vâng, thì như vậy thì quý vị sẽ chỉ nghe được tiếng phiên dịch thôi ạ. Xin cảm ơn rất là nhiều và chúc quý vị sẽ có một cuộc hội thảo thú vị. Thank you.
Thank you. If you are joining us and you prefer to listen to this workshop in Spanish or Vietnamese, please click that interpretation icon that you see on the slide at the bottom of your screen or in the middle of your phone, or if you're on a computer, you want to click interpretation and then select your language. If you're on a tablet, like an iPad or a smartphone too, tap more, then tap language interpretation, and then select the language. If you're having any issues, please reach out to us using chat, and I would send a message to Jennifer Vasconcelos or Marlis Jean to provide that technical assistance with you. We've just activated the interpretation channels, and so this is your chance to click on that so that you can move into an interpretation audio if you are interested in doing so. And now we can get the meeting going. Hi, everyone. Thanks for your patience. I'm Joey Goldman with Kurds in West, and my job this evening is to facilitate, to keep our meeting going, make sure you get the information you're seeking, and that you have an opportunity to provide input in this process. There are a few things that I want to review with you this evening, and that is starting with how to participate. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted online for you to review or for others to watch. But we are looking forward to your participation. We have some opportunities for question and answer periods, and we'll build those in as we go. I mentioned that we have the chat button at the bottom of your screen, and that you can see on the slide here, that you can use to share your questions with us during the Q&A periods. You can also use it, as I mentioned, as a Zoom technical assistance, so we can try to assist you. If you need that support, again, please type in, please select Marlis Jean, our chat manager, and she can take any of the chat comments that you have. If you need technical support, again, please text that to Jennifer Vasconcelo, and she can address your technical issues. During our question and answer period, you can also raise your hand. And I want to point out how we do that. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the reactions button on the Zoom taskbar. Once you click on that, you'll see the option to raise your hand. So first reactions, then raise hand. That's the way we're going to know that you would like to raise a question during our Q&A period. And when we have hands up, we'll take the questions in the order that we see those hands up. For those of you who may have joined us by phone, you dialed in, dialing *9 on your phone is effectively the same thing as raising your hand. So that's a tool that you can use, and we will, when we get to Q&A, we will ask you to share your question with the team. Just two other notes here. Closed captioning has been enabled for this meeting. You can turn on the captions by clicking the closed caption icon. That's also at the bottom of your screen. We want things to go as smoothly as possible. We have just a few housekeeping requests for you. First, there may be a variety of different opinions and concerns, and we ask that you respect those comments, even if you may disagree. Having a virtual meeting means that really only one person can speak at a time. So we are going to do our best to share the limited time we have here. And because of that, everyone's line has been automatically muted, but we'll definitely give you the chance to unmute if you have a question. And because of our time limitations and the number of people here tonight, if you have specific topics you'd like to discuss separately with a member of the panel, we can absolutely schedule a follow-up meeting for you. I don't expect that we'll need to remove anyone from the workshop, but we will if it prohibits others from participating. And finally, technology, as we've already noted tonight, is always full of surprises. I genuinely appreciate your patience if we have any technical glitches moving forward. We do have some objectives I want to share with you for this evening's workshop. Our key objectives are to encourage conversation with you about planned changes that we're looking at in this community, and to talk about some of the challenges that we know residents and small businesses may face, and then really to answer your questions and provide other resources for those of you who are interested in them. Here is our agenda. I know it's a lot on one screen and you may need to look very closely, but we will do our best not to go too far off the agenda. We're starting with a few presentations to give some context for our workshop, to talk about displacement risks and anti-displacement strategies, and to take your questions. That will be followed by some discussion groups, and we'll be moving you into smaller virtual discussion rooms. We call them breakout rooms on Zoom, so that you can share your thoughts on some of the questions that the planning team has for you. Then we'll all come back for a quick report back and talk about what happens next. And at the very end of the scheduled workshop, we're going to save some additional time. Representatives from various city departments will stay in the meeting, and so we can answer follow-up questions that you might have about your own home or your business, and share some of the resources that are available to you. So that's after the meeting ends. Please feel free to stay on so that we can make sure that you get those questions addressed. That's a lot of housekeeping. Thank you for bearing with me. Now it's my pleasure to get us started with our first presenters. Excuse me. Charla Gomez with the City of San Jose, Melissa Cerezo from the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, VTA, and Doug Moody from the BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 Extension Project. Charla.
Thank you, Joey. Good evening, everyone. My name is Charla Gomez. I lead the station area planning team in the citywide planning division. And I work in cooperation with many team members in the city and the Valley Transportation Authority. We're going to go very quickly to this presentation. So the first thing is, what is an urban village plan? A lot of you do not know even what that means. So next slide, please. So basically, the city has a vision for what we call a city of urban villages. These are areas of the city that our general plan, which is the document that dictates the future land uses, tell us that we should concentrate certain level of activity, a mix of uses, so we can have more vibrant spaces that are more pedestrian oriented, less auto-driven. And the idea is just to provide a compact opportunity for products and services, have the ability for people to basically develop a sense of community around these areas. And Five Wounds is one of those areas, but we're going to be doing an update of 4 urban villages. Next slide. So what you see on the screen is basically what is the project that we're working on at this moment. At the center, you see the BART station. That is the future 28th Street Little Portugal BART station. And there are many folks here who are going to talk about that. What you see immediately down that circle and dotted lines is the 4 urban villages that were originally approved by City Council in 2013. One is Five Wounds. The other one is Roosevelt Park Urban Village. The other one is Little Portugal Urban Village. And the other one is 24th Street and William Urban Village. The reason we're including 2 additional urban villages, those are Allen Brock and East Santa Clara, is because we want to do an anti-displacement study that covers 6 urban villages. And by the way, this is the topic of this workshop today, is just to introduce to you what we are in terms of our study about anti-displacement, and we want to make sure that it covers those 6 urban villages. Next slide. This slide basically just to give you a visual cue of those documents. What you see to the right on your screen is the cover pages of those 4 documents. And basically those are a summary of the policies that the city have for each one of those areas. And those are land use policies. Just to be clear, because sometimes people really don't understand what this means in terms of construction or development. What we're doing in the Urban Village Plan update process is just to update the policy, looking into the future. We are not proposing any specific project. There's nothing we're trying to seek feedback in terms of construction. What we're going to do is just to update those policy documents that right now exist and were already approved by the committee. What you see to the left is the cover page of the 28th Street Little Portugal BART station area playbook. That is a document that was put together by BTA and the city in collaboration back in 2019. So that document came out with a lot of recommendations that we want to study and consider for the updates of those 4 urban village plans that you see to the right. So, and if you see in this slide, there is highlighted in yellow the notion of doing a small business in a housing displacement study. That was one of the central concerns of the update process, and that is the reason that we have in this workshop, to make sure that we have a very focused conversation around displacement. Next slide. I want to introduce to you Melissa Cerezo with BTA, who's going to speak about equity. Thanks.
Thank you, Charla. Good evening. My name is Melissa Cerezo from VTA. We're using an equity framework for our project to make sure that how we do this process and what we come up with responds to community needs, especially its challenges, and that we do this in partnership with community. Equity in government involves acknowledging that government has had a history creating positive outcomes for some while possibly ignoring or worsening problems for others. VTA acknowledges the difficulties this community faced when the Alum Rock Bus Rapid Transit Project was constructed. We apologize for the pain and disruption it caused. We want to do better, and with all of our projects. And that means identifying challenges up front and the ability to listen and learn in order to find solutions together in partnership between the city, VTA, and the community. Together, we want to see a place that is thriving, healthy, connected, prosperous, walkable for everyone. We'll now hear from Doug to touch briefly about BART Phase 2 construction and how we will support residences and business. Doug?
Great, thank you, Melissa. And thank you to everyone for being here tonight and having us. Next slide, please. So VTA's BART Phase 2 extension project will complete the ring around the bay of fast, frequent, high-quality passenger rail service. It also has numerous other benefits, including connecting people to opportunities in San Jose and throughout the Bay Area. However, unlike the Alum Rock Bus Rapid Transit Project, which was built on the street, VTA's BART Phase 2 project will be built largely underground in a tunnel, and it will have some above ground components. The most significant construction impacts are expected at the station sites and where the tunnel starts and ends. Construction is expected to generally be constrained within sites owned by VTA, and impacts are expected to be similar to new building construction, which is much less impactful than on-street transit projects. In addition to the project being designed to reduce impacts, VTA is carrying out efforts to support residents and businesses throughout the project. A big reason VTA is undertaking these efforts is because we've been listening to you and responding to and applying what we've heard. Information about strategies VTA is carrying out to support residents and businesses at different project stages is shown on this slide, and we're happy to discuss these with you in greater detail following this presentation. The Small Business Resource Program that is mentioned on this slide is tentatively slated to be discussed at the June VTA board meeting, and community working group meetings are forums to talk with staff and community leaders about VTA's BART project, and the next 28th Street Little Portugal community working group meeting will be on May 17th. Back to you, Melissa.
Thanks, Doug. We acknowledge the strength of this community, which has experienced lots of change. And we want to build upon this strength and face the challenges early on in order to create the most benefit for all people here today, tomorrow, and in the future. For some of you, this is your first city VTA meeting, while others have attended past city or VTA meetings to discuss BART, transportation, COVID recovery, housing. We're using past and new feedback to do better and create the solutions we all want. Tonight's focus, though, is on the housing and business pressures in the area and what other cities facing similar challenges are doing about it. You've told us, and the data shows, people are already leaving, feeling pressured by increasing rents. Families and businesses are moving out. We don't have a proposal just yet. We invite you to share your insights and wisdom to help us strengthen the staying power of this vibrant community. And we know that these are big topics, so we're available after the presentation to discuss your questions in more detail. We won't be able to resolve all of these important issues tonight, but we're committed to working together through ongoing listening, learning, and creating solutions together. Charlotte's going to now recap workshop 1.
Thank you, Melissa. First of all, we have some members of District Council Office, Mr. Ortiz and Councilmember Torres, and I wonder if you guys are there. We would like to give you a little bit of space to introduce yourselves, perhaps, and say a few words. If you are not okay with that or not comfortable, please let us know. Otherwise, yeah, you can say a few words before we recap the workshop 1. or maybe we can do that later on. Let's just move forward with the workshop one. And I apologize, I'm supposed to give that introduction at the beginning of the workshop. Just very briefly, we did the first workshop at the end of last year. Basically what we did was to introduce the project. We gave an overview with what an urban village is, the planning and development framework of the city. We also provided a very broad description of the local existing conditions, what's happening right now, what are the concerns. And we met with a very large group, and we did an exercise on tables where we have basically a land use map activity and small group discussions. And we talk about things, what we should be preserving, what should be keeping, what are the things that the community feels strongly about residential areas or small businesses. But we also ask about the ideas about where to do the new things, the new locations for new projects, where the multifamily products should go, etc. So that was just something that we heard. It was kind of like introduction of the project, but that's bringing us back to workshop 2, which is today, which is the discussion about anti-displacement. Next slide. And again, one of the things that we discuss in detail were particular things. For instance, a lot of folks want to preserve the Five Winds Church. That's basically a long history of the Portuguese community here. So there's a strong desire to preserve that area, including the local businesses in Little Portugal. A lot of folks talk about the Five Winds Trail, the notion of public art. And we heard some preliminary ideas about where buildings should go, and many people expressed the desire to have very big buildings near the BART station. And there are other concerns related to many things, including safety near the freeway entrances. Next slide.
That is our last slide for you. Thank you, Charlotte. I know that Councilmember Ortiz would like to say a couple words. So based on what you were just sharing, we'll go ahead and unmute you so that you can do that.
No, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this very important meeting. My name is Peter Ortiz, and I'm council member for District 5, which is East San Jose. This Five Winds project has been a major priority for my office as I've just won my election and been serving for the last few months. If you're a business owner, you've probably seen us knock on your door or leave flyers talking about support and services. But I'm very much, concerned, and I've said this to city staff and VTA staff in regards to displacement. And I appreciate VTA acknowledging the bus rapid transit issue and how that could have gone a lot better for our businesses on the east side. So I hope that our residents, our Portuguese community, our immigrant community, and our business owners are being vocal on this call because East San Jose is a very special place and we want to keep it that way. And that's why we're having this conversation. So if you have any specific concerns about the Five Winds project, please feel free to reach out to my office. And we're going to be having a close eye on this as we partner with VTA and the city and BART for the completion of this project. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember, for joining us today. Now we're going to take a quick pause in the presentations, and we want to hear from you. Before we go to our next presentation, we really want to just ask a couple of questions to learn about those of you who have joined us this evening. No speaking required. A survey is going to pop up on your screen. If you have dialed in, unfortunately, you will not be able to respond to these questions, but similar questions are posed on a community outreach survey that we'll talk about later in the presentation. So thank you for your patience. You can scroll down on your screen to see the different questions. And here we go. It's time to take a survey. The questions have popped up, and you'll see the first question is, And you can scroll down to see the two of them. Which of these describes you? Mark all that apply. And the options here are a resident, I am a student, I'm a business owner, I'm a community leader, I am an elected official, or I'm something else. And let's just take a few seconds to answer that. If you are quick with your fingers, you may scroll down to the second question. We're interested in knowing how your status of how you live in this community. And so we ask you to please select whether you are a renter, a homeowner, or something else. You see the answers are still coming in. If you're able to respond, we want to know who you are tonight. Let's give it a few more seconds. I think we can go ahead and take a look at what you've told us. Let's end the poll and share out with you. We have a lot of residents, and we have some who are not residents of the neighborhood. Almost 60% of you are residents within the neighborhood area. We also have a number of business owners. Again, not sure that all of you are specific within this area, but we're glad to have you tonight, and we will be talking about business anti-displacement strategies as well. We have several community leaders, and some of you have identified as other, and again, a couple of elected officials. Thanks for joining us this evening. With regard to how do we live in this community, about almost 60%, 58% of you said you are homeowners, you own your home. About 14% of you are renters. And we've still got a big group of 28% who fall into the other category. So that helps us understand kind of who we have here tonight. And as we get into some of our breakout groups and discussions, we'll look forward to hearing a little bit more from you on how your needs are being met in this project. So we'll stop sharing this poll and it should disappear from your screen. And we're going to go on to the next presentation here. Let me click the slide. I'd like to introduce our next speakers, Ada Pang, Aram Kamali, and then Celine Carling from HRNA are going to first talk about residential anti-displacement strategies and then business anti-displacement strategies. And we're going to take a couple of brief breaks for your questions between the residential and business, and then at the end of the business discussion. So if you do have questions, hold those, and then we will have a chance to at least answer a few of those. And with that, I'm glad to have Ada come to the mic.
Thank you, Joey. Good evening, everyone. This is Ada Penn. I'm a director with HRNA Advisors, and our team will share some best practices to mitigate residential and small business displacement risks that are relevant to the Five Wounds neighborhood today. And thank you for joining us. Next slide, please. So as our partners at the city and BTA have mentioned, Five Wounds is a neighborhood with strong resilience, a diverse and culturally rich community, and as well as a variety of legacy business and a long-standing history of community organizing and self-determination to address rising issues. This is just the beginning of a series of conversations to identify the best strategies to mitigate displacement. And we recognize that this is a complicated and often personal challenge. We welcome your inputs and feedback along the process. Next slide. And first, we would like to recap on what we mean by displacement and some of the key findings from our existing condition analysis. Residential displacement represents the involuntary relocation and exclusion of residents from an area. This often occurs as a result of gentrification. And gentrification is a process of neighborhood change demonstrated by an influx of higher income households that contributes to rising housing costs. Anti-displacement strategies should really aim to assist all three common types of residential displacement. Direct displacement occurs when residents are forced to vacate and leave their homes due to evictions, eminent domain, and other factors such as poor physical conditions that make buildings uninhabitable. Indirect displacement occurs when low-income households can no longer afford to move into a neighborhood when new housing units become available. This shift can stem from rising housing demand and rising rent. Lastly, cultural displacement occurs as the scale of residential change advances and transforms the character of the neighborhood. Shops and services shift to focus on newer and often more affluent residents, making longtime residents feel unwelcomed or alienated despite remaining in this neighborhood. Next slide. So when we looked into the demographic and socioeconomic data trends, we found that gentrification and displacement have likely already occurred in the 5-1 neighborhood. Property value and resident household income levels have increased significantly in the past decade, while the number of lower income households and Hispanic households have decreased. Next slide. And a couple groups of renter households are at particularly higher risk of displacement. And that includes renters living in single-family homes and duplexes. They are currently not covered by the city's apartment rent ordinance, which can protect them from rent hikes. Renters who speak limited English and often undocumented individuals are often targets for eviction and face additional hurdles to find and keep affordable housing. Next slide. Households with lower incomes have limited financial means to withstand escalating housing costs. And lastly, rising housing costs may also lead to overcrowding as a coping mechanism and cause households to either move to smaller unit or double up with other households. Next slide. We want to recognize that the city currently focuses on the following 3 approaches on housing production and neighborhood stability, specifically with a goal to produce sufficient housing for residents at all income levels, preserve existing affordable housing stock, and protect existing renters and homeowners from potential displacement in rapidly changing neighborhoods. Next slide. And in general, local jurisdictions are able to mitigate residential displacement through regulations and incentives, providing funding and financing resources and other direct services for tenants and property owners, including education, outreach, legal representation, and others. And now I will pass it to my colleague to share out some of the best practices and lessons learned on residential anti-displacement strategies from other cities.
Thank you, Ada. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aram Kamali, and I am a senior analyst of HR&A Advisors. I'm just going to walk through a few examples of strategies that other cities have used to stabilize neighborhoods and mitigate residential displacement. Next slide. So first, we'll be talking about San Francisco. Many cities across the country are evaluating ways to provide housing opportunities for people who have experienced displacement. San Francisco has actually developed a successful method of doing so. So specifically, when new affordable housing is built, the city administers a few different programs that give displaced tenants a higher chance of securing one of these units. For example, one program sets aside a certain share of units in a project for tenants that were displaced due to an eviction, a fire, or an expiring affordability restriction. Another program sets aside units for households that were displaced due to past redevelopment activity. And the third program sets aside units for lower income households that live in the same area as a certain project. This essentially gives low-income renters a chance to stay in their neighborhood without the risk of being displaced. So what are some of the pros? Well, there are a few benefits to this type of strategy. First, it establishes a clear method to help displaced tenants regain their housing stability. It also gives low-income renters the opportunity to relocate to a higher resource neighborhood that could support their quality of life as well as economic mobility. Moving to the cons, this type of strategy can really only succeed or make a strong impact if there is enough housing development occurring. In other words, if there's not a lot of development occurring, then there are no units to award to the households that need them the most. So our next example takes us to San Diego. So here, the city administers two programs that incentivize homeowners to build affordable accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs. An ADU is a small secondary home that's built on the same property as a larger home. The state of California already allows one ADU to be built on most types of residential properties, but the city of San Diego goes a step further. So currently, it administers a program that allows a homeowner to build 2 additional ADUs on their property as long as one of them is affordable. In addition to this, the city administers a separate program that provides low-interest loans to low-income homeowners that want to build an affordable ADU on their property. So turning to the pros, this strategy is very helpful because it helps to create affordable housing in low-density single-family neighborhoods. So since 2021, San Diego has permitted the construction of 295 affordable ADUs. For context, the city only permitted the construction of 7 affordable ADUs between 2018 and 2021. Another benefit is that ADUs also provide opportunities for homeowners to generate supplemental income and build wealth. As far as the cons, this strategy may not necessarily succeed in every neighborhood. ADUs can only be built on properties that are big enough to accommodate them. Also, homeowners might not participate in this type of program if they don't have enough support and education throughout the planning and construction process. So our last example takes us to the city of Oakland. Here, the city is considering a strategy that would use increases in property tax revenues to fund affordable housing development. This would apply across the entire city. That means that property tax revenues from an area like downtown could be used to fund development in a different part of the city. As far as the pros go, we think this is a promising strategy because it can create a new dedicated funding stream for affordable housing, and that funding can specifically target neighborhoods in high need, such as neighborhoods that are experiencing gentrification or displacement. However, implementing this sort of strategy is not simple. We can go to the next slide. Implementing this sort of strategy is not simple. In order to generate enough tax revenues to make a meaningful impact, the city would likely also need the county to participate in such a program. This basically means that 2 public entities would have to agree to allocate their revenues or some of their revenues for affordable housing. So those are 3 residential case studies. And before we move to our next section, I'll just pause here to see if there are any questions or comments.
Thanks, Aram. We do have a few questions that have come in, but we also want to give an opportunity for people to raise their hand and ask questions. A couple quick notes that have come in from people asking questions. And I don't know that they're specifically about this, so we may want to hold off on a couple of the questions about this. There is a question from Maria Garcia. Could you please tell me what are the approximate permit costs for ADU units?
I don't have that information off the top of my head. I suspect it may differ based on jurisdiction. Yeah, that information is not readily available to me at the moment.
And we will have a follow-up discussion at the end of the meeting. And I think some of our staff from the city can help get that question answered for you as well. There was a question as well about, will the PowerPoint be shared? Yes, it will be up on the city's website. Within a couple of weeks, you'll be able to see the full presentation. We have a couple of hands up. And again, we have very limited time. I'll go to, first was Gail and then Danny. Gail, you are free to unmute yourself. Yep, I can. Are you able to unmute yourself? There you go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Okay. You know, I've been in the Bay Area all my life, and I'm 62 years old. And I've had my own problems of being evicted, etc. And there's a lot of frustration with what I see going on from all levels, but I don't know everything by any means. But one of the things that he just said that stemmed a kind of hit a string with me, and because I was in escrow for 42 years, is that anybody not around an affordable housing location, those who are saying, oh, the affordable housing unit should go in on this street, on Bascom, or it should go in over here on Camden or whatever, any homeowner that isn't near those places or within a mile or some constructive distance should have their taxes increased to help with the affordability, because we're going to sustain a lot of added traffic and et cetera for those who live right by it. But for all those other people living in other areas where they don't have any affordable housing near them, they should have to pay a price for it.
Thanks for your comment, Gail. It doesn't sound, I guess I'm assuming that I don't hear quite a question there, but it sounds like a point that you wanted to make to the group this evening.
Yeah, I'm sorry if it wasn't the right time.
No, that's fine. Thanks for your comment. Next is Danny. I can go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, let me just ask, is this a time where we can make clarification about urban villages in Alum Rock?
If you have a question, please go ahead and ask it.
Yeah, so I would like to know who gave you the information that there is actually an urban village on Alum Rock Avenue? Because 5 1/2 pages did not create an urban village, and the city said so in Alum Rock. We've been involved for years, since before the SNI. This is why the Alum Rock Urban Village Advocates organization was created, because we don't have an urban village. So I want to know who is creating that thought on Alum Rock Avenue next from 101 East to Jackson. 'Cause that's just a lie.
Danny, thanks for your question. I don't know if Charla, if you might have an answer to this question and want to chime in.
Yeah, I only want to say that there is an approved city council urban village plan for Little Portugal. And there is another urban village plan, city council approved urban village plan for Alum Rock. We are not updating that one, we're updating Little Portugal, but we are studying anti-displacement for Alum Rock. And I believe there is another urban village plan that is coming up under the planning process, that's East Alum Rock. So between the 101 and the other freeway, there is urban village plans that are already approved by city council. And Danny, I'd be happy to connect with you offline and just send you the documentation that we have in the city, but we have some city documents that were approved by city council.
We have time for just a couple more. I just want to, I know Brenda, I know your hand is up. and I want to get to you. I just want to quickly read. Terry had said that his San Jose ADU costs $1,300 in permits and fees. There's a question from Jay Cervantes. How are flood zones affected by ADU permits, such as the neighborhoods as Alviso? I don't know if anyone is able to answer that right now, or if that might be a question that we could follow up with Jay Cervantes on.
No, I think in the interest of time, let's just move on. I think Brenda has a question. We can answer that question afterwards.
Yeah, I think there are several questions about ADUs, and it sounds like we could do some follow-up with those of you who have those questions. Brenda, please, you should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sí, mi pregunta es cuántas personas podemos vivir en una adulta, cuántas podemos vivir en una adulta, cuántas podemos vivir en una adulta.
I'm afraid that we can't hear you. It's echoing. It's best, I'm sorry. Sorry, we're just checking internally. For some reason, your audio is echoing. If you want to send your message to Jennifer Vasconcelos, if you want to type in the chat, then we can take that question from you. I know we've got another question or so, but we are running tight on time. And I don't want to ignore your questions. I want to make sure that we will have time later in the presentation to get to those questions. But we do have some more to present. So we're going to go back to our presentation and jump into the commercial displacement risk best practices. And I'd like to ask Subin to give us an overview on that.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sue-Lynn Carling. I'm a principal at HRNA, and I will dive into our commercial displacement risk best practices. So next slide. What is commercial displacement? Commercial displacement might occur due to rises in commercial rents, changes in the customer base as gentrification occurs, new development on properties that businesses occupy, and for industrial businesses, limited other places to locate due to limited industrial land in San Jose. These are all factors that could contribute to small businesses being potentially displaced from a neighborhood. Next slide. To provide an overview of the context here, the study area for this analysis is comprised of the 6 urban villages. They contain 850 businesses and 2,700 jobs. In red, you can see local services such as salons and shoe repair are dispersed throughout the study area. In blue, retail and food services is concentrated along East Santa Clara Street and Alum Rock Avenue. And then in purple, industrial and auto services are concentrated within 5 Wounds and the 24th and William urban villages. Next slide. In terms of the number of jobs and number of businesses, those 3 sectors, industrial and auto services, retail, trade and food services, and local services account for almost 3/4 of all jobs and all businesses in the study area. Next slide. We analyzed an array of data looking at business trends in the area, and our analysis found that businesses today are healthy and stable. The area contains almost entirely small businesses. Many of those businesses have fewer than 10 employees. There's a strong local consumer base that supports those businesses. There's a balance of old and new businesses, including a significant number of businesses older than 20 years. And most businesses in the area have benefited from affordable and stable commercial rents. Next slide. However, our analysis also found that small businesses may be at risk for displacement in the future. Because these sites tend to be larger, the study areas, industrial and commercial sites are often the most attractive for new development. Few businesses in the area own their space, making them vulnerable to rent increases in the future. And if people who live in the neighborhood are displaced as gentrification occurs, businesses could lose existing customers. Next slide. Now, the city conducted outreach to a few dozen businesses in February and heard a number of things. We heard that the study area is a great location for businesses to locate. There's freeway access and a strong local consumer base. The primary concerns of the businesses today were security, parking, and people experiencing homelessness. Most of their concerns about the future BART station and new development, the concerns were really focused on the construction of the station and not so much on commercial displacement and being at risk of being priced out of the neighborhood. However, this could change in the future, and we've seen this in other neighborhoods, which is why the city is proactively looking at this issue. Next slide. Similar to the residential study, we reviewed what other cities have done to address commercial displacement. And these strategies really fall into three categories: real estate strategies, technical and financial assistance to businesses, and regulations on the business environment. Next slide. So first, so we'll go through three examples. Next slide. So first, I'll give an example from New York City. The city of New York was able to use city-owned land to create affordable retail space. When the city sold city-owned land to a developer, it required the developer to replace a historic market that was on that site and incorporate a new market into the new housing and commercial space that was being developed. This market provides affordable space to 21 legacy food vendors that would otherwise have been displaced from their longtime home. Now, the pros of this strategy is it's a way to guarantee certain neighborhood businesses with affordable space because the city is making a direct agreement with a property developer. However, a con is that publicly owned land in this study area is limited. And so the strategy would really be able to create only a limited amount of affordable space that would serve a relatively small number of businesses in the study area. Now I'm going to go on to another strategy that multiple cities have used, including Akron, Detroit, and Milwaukee. These cities have launched site matching programs that connect owners of vacant space with small business owners that are looking for space. These programs also offer financial assistance to small businesses, as well as technical assistance, which can include anything from helping them adopt new technology to business planning to help them grow and thrive. Now, the pro of this strategy is that this is an opportunity to help businesses that are displaced to find new affordable space while providing additional assistance to really ensure that they can thrive in their new place and pivot and adapt to a new space. A con, though, is that it may be difficult to find vacant and affordable space for businesses. And so the success of the strategy will depend on the availability of that affordable space. One more example I'm going to talk about is from San Francisco. In San Francisco, there have been many older businesses that have closed or are at risk of closing due to rising rents and other rising costs. The city and the county together established the Legacy Business Historic Preservation Fund, which provides grants to legacy small businesses and incentives to property owners that lease to those legacy businesses. So the pro of this business is that business owners, the pro of this strategy, that is, we go to the next slide, is that business owners are provided direct assistance and access to affordable space through these incentives. The con is that the program would require substantial public funding and administrative support on behalf of the city. So those were the three strategies that we wanted to share with you all, and now we welcome any questions. I'll hand it back to Joey.
Thanks, Susan, for the overview there. We have time for a few questions as well. And the first hand up is from Jesus Flores. You should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. Jesus Flores, I am Executive Director of Latino Business Foundation. We provide technical support, assistance, training, and advocacy to small businesses. And I want to make a couple of comments. And I'm not sure if I hear correctly, but during the last presentation, it was mentioned that some of the small businesses around the area might be at risk. And I think we should correct that, because most small businesses around the area are at high risk at this moment. They are, the expression of saying maybe or might be at risk, I don't think is correct, because most of these businesses are at high risk at this time. And obviously when constructions start, there will be a very, very high risk of being displaced. Also, a comment, 65% of small businesses in this area, especially along Alum Rock, don't have a lease. They actually on a month-to-month lease, 65% of them. And as you mentioned, Celine, if as we know, probably, I believe it's 60 or 70% of the small businesses don't own the land or don't own the places. They are renters. And of those, 65% are in a month-to-month lease. It's obvious that, once again, they are all at very, very high risk of being displaced. That's just a comment. And obviously that is, I will say, because of speculation. A lot of landlords don't want to provide any more long-term leases, because obviously these properties are going up in value, especially now with these constructions are going to go up in value. So they don't want to give those long-term leases. That is the main reason why most of them or many of them don't have a lease. They're in a month-to-month. I really like the examples that you provided. I think some of those can be implemented. I especially like the New York example. I think city-owned land, and even though it was mentioned that is limited in our area, I think that's something that we must explore, finding city-owned places to accommodate these small businesses that are being displaced. Some of the examples also mention spaces for small businesses, but we know that once there are new constructions, those new spaces available are gonna go up in value. And that will obviously be very, very hard for small businesses to acquire any spaces for rents. So I know I don't want to take too long. That was my comment.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks so much for sharing your comment. We have a couple questions that have come in, and then I want to make sure that everyone here has a chance to speak. So Danny, I may have to hold your question until later, but we definitely want to get to it. One thing I just want to remind everyone too is at the end of the meeting today, there will be an opportunity to have a lot of your questions about ADUs and specific things about your property or your business addressed by representatives from the city of San Jose. So I do want to make sure that you're aware, if you can stay on, we'll even create breakout rooms as needed so that you can get your questions asked. There was a question that did come in that I just want to make sure we do get a chance, and we've got a few comments from folks. One of the questions was, how do the cities like Detroit fund the grants? That came from Nathan Ulsh. Dylan?
Yeah, the different cities that have adopted that program, which as a reminder for everyone is the site matching program, helping businesses find new spaces. They've been funded by a variety of different sources, community development block grants, federal sources. They've been funded by foundations, and they've also been funded, I believe, by city budgets themselves. So it's really been a diversity of different sources that different cities have been able to cobble together.
Thanks, Susan. I want to share just a couple of comments that have come in. David Vieira notes that Little Portugal Urban Village spans Highway 101 to King. Anything east of King is form-based zoning. He indicates there was never community input in a formal way east of King. It's an urban village plan in name only. I think that was kind of responding to some of the comments that you may have shared with us earlier, Danny. There is also a note that our local businesses are doing so well. If local businesses are doing so well, I imagine there are a lot of abandoned businesses and storefronts along Santa Clara and Alum Rock. And just one other question that did come in from Maria Garcia. Does the city believe that the city itself has a problem with not having enough housing units for rent, or is it more of an affordability problem? Does anyone from the city want to take that one?
Maybe Josh is online, can answer the question, but my understanding is both. The city does not have enough capacity of housing, and the affordability is a problem. Basically, the ability of folks to pay for the rents because they don't have the necessary income. So it's a combination of both factors, and that's one of the challenges.
Given that we are tight on time, I just want to note we did have a question about when will we know if our business is getting displaced? I think that's a question that a lot of people might have. How can we respond to Amanda, who asked that question?
That's a very complicated question, and as I described in the beginning, there are a lot of pressures that can lead to a business being displaced, right? So one very common way is that rents can be raised. Mr. Flores referenced that a lot of businesses actually have short-term leases, and so if your lease is not renewed, that also can cause displacement. But then there are other longer-term things that might happen in terms of, if the neighborhood changes, if there's gentrification, if the customers change, that can also over time really be damaging to a business. So it's hard to pinpoint it. It's we're hearing that there are already there are already businesses at risk, and there's a number of different forces that can happen that will impact different small businesses at different times.
I know there are several more questions. We don't have time to get to them right now. It's not that I don't want to ask your questions, but we will find time later, and I apologize. I do think that a couple of our next speakers who are just going to speak for just 2 or 3 minutes, Josh Ichimatsu from the city of San Jose and Vic Farley may be able to address some of the resources that some of you are talking about. Josh, can I pass it to you?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Ishimatsu, and I'm an acting division manager for the City of San Jose Housing Department. And I'll be giving a quick overview of the City of San Jose programs and policies to prevent displacement of people who are living in San Jose. So as Ada mentioned in her presentation earlier, the main ways the city goes about preventing displacement is through the 3 Ps: production, preservation, and protection. So production is the construction of new units of affordable housing. On an annual basis, the City of San Jose supports private developers, both nonprofit and for-profit, to build new affordable housing in the City of San Jose. Preservation is primarily nonprofit organizations purchasing and rehabilitating existing low-cost market rate housing and converting it to housing that is affordable on a long-term basis. Right now, the city does not do very much housing preservation, and we are currently trying to develop some new preservation programs. Protection is about making sure that tenant rights are protected and that tenants are not unlawfully removed from their housing. There are a number of laws and programs that the city enforces around tenant protections. One is the apartment rent ordinance, which limits how much rents can be raised for apartments that were built before September 1979. Another is the tenant protection ordinance, which says that tenants cannot be evicted without just cause. And the final program highlighted on this slide is the Eviction Help Center, which supports tenants who are threatened with eviction and provide referrals to mediation or legal assistance. Next slide, please. So in September 2020, the City of San Jose, the City Council of the City of San Jose passed an anti-displacement plan called the Citywide Anti-Displacement Strategies. So this is a set of recommendations that was developed with extensive community input, almost a year's worth of outreach with hundreds of community participants, including many stakeholders from the set of neighborhoods that we're talking about now. In passing the plan, the City Council directed city staff to begin work on the top 3 recommendations of the plan, including developing a tenant's preferences for people at risk of displacement, developing a community opportunity to purchase program, or COPA, which would support nonprofit developers to purchase existing low-cost housing and preserve the units of affordable housing. So this would be a housing preservation program of the 3 Ps. And by the way, staff will be presenting our proposal for COPA to City Council next Tuesday, April 25th. And the final of the top recommendations from the citywide anti-displacement strategies that we're currently working on is to increase the representation of people with lived experience on city commissions, like the Housing and Community Development Commissions. And also I should note here that community stakeholders have continued to be involved in the development and implementation of each of these proposed programs and activities. Next slide, please. So for people here who may be directly dealing with more immediate issues of displacement, the city also supports the following program. So for people who may need short-term rental assistance, the city supports a homeless prevention system, which is jointly run by Destination Home and Sacred Heart Community Services. So among supports that they may be able to provide is more immediate rental assistance, and they can be reached at preventhomelessness.org or 408-926-8885. For ongoing rental assistance that may not be helpful for a more immediate problem, there's also longer-term rental assistance available through the county's Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. And the phone number for this on the slide is 408-275-8770. And finally, this one was mentioned before, for people who are facing a potential eviction, the city runs eviction help centers. So one of them is at City Hall on the 12th floor, and one is at 1818 Tully Road. Phone number you can call is 408-975-4444, or you can email at evictionhelp@sanjose.gov. So the Eviction Help Center can help inform people of their rights through the eviction process. And as I mentioned before, can provide referrals to mediation or legal assistance. So thank you, back to Joe.
I think perhaps Vic, you are presenting on small business. Hello.
Good evening, everyone. Hello. My name is Vic Foley. I work for the City of San Jose, and I help small businesses across all of the city. And I'm going to give you a little introduction here to small business here in the Five Wounds study area. There are, on average, construction and car repair businesses that have been here for 19 years on average, and for retail businesses been here for 10 years on average. That shows us that the business owners in Five Wounds are entrepreneurial, resilient, and very determined. Thank you. Next slide, please. Investing in a full-time person to support the East Side small businesses will be the next move to support directly everyone here in the Five Wounds area. We will also be establishing business networks across Alum Rock and East Santa Clara Street to help businesses understand more and get to know everyone in the area and their business leaders. We will use this study to support a bigger citywide study on the threat of business displacement. And we hope to report to City Council early next year in 2024. Next slide, please. So the next steps of our focus are: one, how best to support businesses to stay here. I'd like to repeat, we want businesses to stay here in this area. Two, we want to preserve industrial and commercial land because that is important to the community in retaining the businesses and retaining jobs. And finally, we want to preserve some or all of the existing property for future business tenants. These are the main themes that we will be considering as part of this study. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vic. This is our chance. This is our chance to hear more from you. Excuse me. And I do want to acknowledge, forgive me, that many of you have been sharing your comments and some additional questions. We're going to make sure that we respond to those of you who've done that. If you registered, we'll be able to follow up with you. So I apologize that we may not be able to get to all of those questions in the discussion. But right now, we're going to be breaking up into what we're calling discussion groups. And it's an opportunity for you to move into a breakout room. We will have a note taker and a facilitator in each room who will track what the group is saying. And at the end of the breakout session, I'll call on a few of you to share what you think might be an important topic moving forward. Let's talk a little bit about how we're going to do this. We've got a few discussion questions that I want to just quickly note. These are some of the types of things we can ask you about, whether you live or work in the area, how your neighborhood may have changed, and if so, how it's changed over time in terms of residents or housing availability or housing costs. What do you think the new BART station and the associated new development might mean for the neighborhood? How will it create changes for people who live here? And we have these same questions for on the business side as well. What would it look like for the city to increase its support of affordable housing? What feedback would you have on the anti-displacement strategies that Aram and Sulin talked about just a moment ago? And as I mentioned, we will have some resources available at the end of the meeting. We'd be interested in hearing what resources you may be familiar with or what you've used. Again, similar questions for businesses. What types of businesses are located? What are the advantages of locating here? You know, if you were to sell the neighborhood to a prospective business owner, what would you tell them? Why come to the Five Wounds Urban Villages area? And again, how you think BART might affect the business ownership and create opportunities for local businesses. And what, again, the city might be able to do to increase its support of the neighborhood small businesses. So we're going to join discussion groups, and this is how it's going to work. In just a moment, you're going to see a box appear on your screen, and we want you to click join when you see that pop-up message. It will pop up at the center of your screen if you're on the computer. If you're on a tablet or on a phone, you will also see it in the middle of your screen. Once you click join, the main Zoom screen that you see me on right now is going to disappear. And you're going to be going into the breakout room where you'll see a message on your screen that says you are in the breakout room. If you use the interpretation channels, please stay here. We don't want you to move to one of the breakout rooms. We're going to have a breakout discussion in this room, and we will keep our interpreters in here. I do want to ask that you please refrain from clicking join to a breakout room if you are going to be staying in here, because we will not be doing interpretation in the breakout rooms. And if you need to come back to the main room from your breakout room, just go to the leave room button, which is in the bottom right corner of your Zoom screen, and we'll have you join us here. So here we go. You're going to see this pop up on your screen. We ask that you click join, and you will be moved to a discussion group where we have 15 minutes to hear some of your thoughts on some of these questions. We have a little bit of time for some members of our breakout rooms to share what you heard. And I think I would be interested in whoever is interested. Just go ahead and raise your hand if you are one of the note takers. You may have somebody in your group who's interested in sharing out. Why don't you go ahead and raise your hand so I can call on you, and we can hear maybe a couple of things that 2 or 3 of the groups talked about. Who's interested in sharing back? I'm gonna ask Doug to unmute and share what your group talked about, please.
Yeah, so we had some comments about preserving existing housing being important. Elma or Adondo was also there. Elma, if you want to say your piece, I think you should come off mute and say your thing. But if you don't, I'll say it for you. So Elma mentioned a local preference policy, that a big reason the community supports affordable housing developments, they want to see local folks live in them. And some folks, there's examples of, new developments largely being occupied by folks that weren't local.
Really good point. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
Who else would like to report back? How about Anthony? You want to tell us what a point or two that your group discussed? You should be able to unmute. We'll come back to you in just a second, Anthony, if you're not able to. I'm going to go to Christina, and then we'll go back to you, Anthony, after Christina unmutes and shares something that you talked about.
I think she's muted, or can you speak?
Okay, it just popped up. So some comments from our group were that they would like to see some mixed income types of housing, so both affordable and market rate, and just more housing helping benefit foot traffic for businesses. So seeing increases in housing also benefiting the businesses. And a few other points were about the just the harm that was caused to many businesses from the BRT construction along Alum Rock and the removal of the parking spaces, and just that even downtown looks like a lot of empty shops are there, and that Santa Clara, whether it things that the city can do to help bring in more businesses and recover from kind of COVID effects on businesses.
Thanks, Christina. We'll go to Anthony, and then Natasha, you can have the last word on the report outs.
Thank you, Joey. Yeah, we had a few business owners and property owners, and one of the items that came up was the permitting process with the city, streamlining that process. We had somebody who had an ADU, and they thought that the process went very smoothly. So I believe there's room for improvement. But yeah, it was very interesting because The individuals had experienced, the process and had some definite opinions on how it can be improved.
And Natasha.
Yeah, we had some great discussion in breakout room 6. And I think that 3 things that just like stuck on the top of my mind was one of the members said that they would really like to see, they were trying not to get into politics, but they said that, if the student loan support goes through, then students will have more money to have affordability. And I think that often we forget about people that aren't traditionally able to apply for supportive housing. So students or illegal immigrants, things like that people that might be forgotten and slip through the cracks, that we support them. There was also a really great point brought up about putting together a formal cultural district and really marketing and sharing the story, wide and far about how many great historical things are in East San Jose. Cesar Chavez's home, the lowrider history, the farm worker history in this area is so rich, and we can really be proud of it and market that better to support our businesses. So those are just two things top of mind.
Thank you so much for reporting back. And for those who were in the larger room, we had a brief conversation with some other ideas. I know there were some other suggestions that came up in the various rooms. We have taken notes for everything that you said. We're going to be putting together a summary of all of the feedback that you've given. I also want to acknowledge some of you have been asking questions. I've gotten some direct chats that I have not been able to respond to. I apologize for that. We will track all of those. And as we can, we'll certainly try to get back to you too, to make sure that we close the loop with you. The goal is not to have questions dangling here. We have a couple slides we want to show you to wrap up. And then I will invite you to stay on. We want to make sure you can leave if you're ready to leave, but we want to stay here to get some of those answers to some of those questions that you've been sharing. So I'm going to ask, I'm going to put a slide back up on the screen, and Charlotte's going to give us an overview of the next steps.
Thank you, Joey. So first of all, thanks again, everyone, for joining us tonight. I think we have a really amazing attendance, something like more than 100 people. That's really good. And as he said, we're going to collect all these questions and get back to you and close the loop. We don't want to just leave questions and answer. We'll address all of them. So the next steps, if you want to have a feel of the whole project, because sometimes, all these events happen, you don't know where this falls into the whole sequence of steps. You have a QR code to the left. You can do that with your phone. You immediately will bring you to the website of the project, or if you just want to type the project website, it's really right there at the top of the screen. Send us an email. There's an opportunity to sign up in that website. We'll take all your comments. Feel free to send that to the team. We'll figure it out who can give you the best answer. Next slide. And again, we want to clarify that we're all doing a lot of engagement opportunities. We think that this online workshop was a good idea. We wanted to provide a different opportunity to reach out to folks. The first one was in person. This one is online. The next one will be in person again. We think that it's going to be sometime in the fall, early in the fall. There is opportunities to do online surveys that is in the website. Please go ahead and fill those surveys. Will be open until June, I believe. There will be some walk audits too. You're interested in walking with us and telling us what you feel, you think about everything. We're very happy to be with you and hear what you have to say. And that we're gonna have a stakeholder meetings. The BTA team is also holding focus groups, things like that. So we're doing a lot of things. We want to make sure that we really reach out, go the extra mile, and collect your input here. And next slide. And just to give you a broad view of the different workshops, we have 5 workshops for the updates of the 5 Wounds Urban Village Plan, but we call key community engagement milestones. But again, these are not the only ones. There's plenty of opportunity to hear your voices and the other types of tools that we have. as I said before, workshop number 1 was on December 8, 2022. This is when we introduced the project. We went to the market analysis, existing conditions, kind of like framing what we're going to do. And that brought us to today, where we basically went to everything related to residential and small business anti-displacement, simply because we thought it was important to actually have one workshop focus only on that. So we heard your voices today. Thank you so much. The next one will be in late summer 2023. That will be the concept plans. We hope to bring back to you with actual ideas, exactly how this is going to look like in terms of land use, urban design, transportation, open space, parking, everything. We are going to do that in person again. And then we have 2 more workshops. It's a pretty a busy schedule for the rest of the year. In the fall, we'll have something about transportation. A lot of people just are concentrated about what happens from the transportation standpoint. People want to make sure that they have right way to access the BART station. They don't want to use the car. A lot of people have questions about parking. So some of you have very good questions about what happened with parking. We are doing a district parking study, and we're going to talk about parking a lot that day. We're going to talk about streets. We talk about how to wait to get to the BART station. And finally, hopefully, if we are on time, if everything goes well, by the end of this year, we'll present the final plans in an open house format, which is our typical way of presenting what the city and BTA will be recommending. So it's kind of like a big overview. Just keep that in mind. But again, the best source of information is the project website. We'll give we'll actually upload there the summary of the workshop, the slides of the workshop, the webinars, everything. That would be your main source of information. Next slide.
That's the end of it. Then we're
it.
going to open the resource room for those of you who are interested in staying around, and our representatives from the city will try to answer your questions, and we can move people into private discussions to some extent. We can also, just I want to note, take down your information and schedule a follow-up conversation if you have specific questions about your residence or about your business. I will just reiterate what Charlotte has just said. Thank you all so much for joining us. I again offer some apologies that we couldn't get to every question. We've got them all, and we're going to spend a lot of time going back through them and making sure that this information is available. And if you have neighbors or friends who would have liked to have come tonight, the recordings, as were mentioned, are going to be on the city's website, on the Five Winds website that Charlotte showed, and they will be available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. So you will have an opportunity to review those there. With that, I'm happy to close the meeting and thank you all, and invite the rest of you who'd like to stay. We're going to just pause for a few minutes to let people transition here, and then we'll take your questions. Thank you so much. For those of you who are still with us, thanks for staying. We have a number of representatives from the city, from BTA. The purpose of having this is kind of a virtual open house. We have about 20 minutes, and the goal is to try to match you with people who can answer your questions. The questions can't be answered tonight. We want to figure out how they can be answered and how we can get back to you. And so I invite you to raise your hand as you've done, Danny, and thanks for doing that. My apologies earlier that I couldn't get to your second question, but why don't we start with you, and then others who may have questions, go ahead and raise your hand. That's going to be the best way to interact with this group who's remaining here. Danny, you should be able to unmute now.
Okay, hey, I wanna thank you guys for this today. I'm sorry I missed December. I belong to a lot of organizations. This was really nice. I'm glad that you were able to review my statement about there not being any urban village in Alum Rock. With that being said, now that you understand that we're under assault from developers and in our opinion, by the city as well, anything conceptual has to come through the neighborhoods.